The average American household has fewer than 3 days of food that would still be usable if the power went out, the grocery store was picked over, or fresh supply got disrupted for any reason. 3 days. That is not a prepper statistic. That is a FEMA baseline figure that has been consistent for years, and it is one of the most unsettling numbers in food preparedness because it is so easy to underestimate. Now here's the thing. You don't need a bunker. You don't need thousands of dollars of freeze-dried meals. You don't need to turn your spare bedroom into a warehouse. What you need is a precise, well-chosen selection of canned foods, and the right 11 cans can carry a household through weeks of supply disruption, price spikes, grocery shortages, or genuinely hard economic periods without you losing access to complete, satisfying, nutritious meals. But here is where almost every prepper list gets it wrong. They give you the same 20 items from 2018, with no connection to what is actually happening in food supply chains right now. This list is different. Every single item on it is backed by market data from 2025 and 2026, real crop reports. These aren't predictions. They're happening. These are the 11 canned foods you actually need. Not the 11 that look good on a list. The 11 that do real work when things go sideways. And by the time this video ends, you will know not just what to buy, but exactly why each one belongs in your pantry, what it does that nothing else does, and which ones you should be moving on before the market catches up to what's already starting. If you're new here, subscribe now. We track food supply chains and pricing signals every week so you don't have to. And keep watching, because items 8 and 11 on this list are the two that most people watching right now do not have, and both of them are going to matter more than you'd expect. Let's get into it. Item 1. Canned tomatoes, the can that makes everything else edible. Let's start with canned tomatoes, and let me be direct about why this is number 1. This is not a vegetable. This is a force multiplier. Without it, your pantry is a collection of individual ingredients. With it, those same ingredients become actual meals. Soups, stews, pasta, rice dishes, bean meals, skillet dinners, all of them rely on tomatoes as the base layer that adds acid, body, moisture, and flavor. And that means every can of tomatoes you store is quietly multiplying the value of every other can next to it. Now here is the current market reality. Florida's official freeze damage report documents that tomatoes took heavy winter losses, with production damage across 27,900 acres estimated at 80%, and approximately 62% of the growing season still remaining when those losses were counted. That is a dramatic supply hit on the fresh side. Then FreshPoint's March 20th market alert confirmed that overall tomato supplies were trending lighter in both the East and West, and that the market had moved higher. And on the processing side, the side that fills the cans you're buying at the grocery store, California processors reported to the USDA that they plan to contract 9.88 million tons for the 2026 season, which is down 11% from the 11 million ton forecast made just months earlier in August 2025, with contracted acreage also down 10%. Put all of that together and canned tomatoes stop looking like an ordinary pantry item. They start looking like the one can that keeps 10 other foods functional. Here's what most people get wrong when they build a pantry. They buy tomato sauce and think they're covered. But tomato paste is the real value play. One small can of tomato paste contains roughly 6 times the flavor concentration per ounce compared to sauce. That means you can stretch it across 8 to 10 separate meals, soups, chili, pasta, braises, without opening a single large can. When you're managing a pantry carefully, paste gives you control that sauce doesn't. Buy whole or diced for meal volume. Buy crushed and sauce for fast soups and skillet meals. And buy paste as your high-density flavor reserve. If you only grab one canned vegetable category before prices shift further, make it tomatoes. Everything else on this list will taste better because of it. Item 2. Canned beans, the quiet crisis most shoppers haven't noticed yet. Once tomatoes are covered, canned beans are the next move, and I want to be specific about which beans. Not green beans. I'm talking black beans, pinto beans, kidney beans, white beans, and chickpeas. The protein-dense legumes that can anchor a full meal rather than just adding color to a plate. Here is the supply story that is playing out quietly right now. The USDA's 2025 annual summary reported that U.S. dry edible bean production fell 14% from the previous year, with planted area down 11%, harvested area down 11%, and yield declining as well across key growing regions. Then the March 2026 USDA Crop Progress Report, showed drought coverage across the lower 48 states, jumping sharply from 43% to 55% in just 5 weeks, with the most severe drought categories more than doubling and conditions worsening, particularly across the plains, the South, and parts of the Midwest. And the reason that drought signal matters specifically for beans is that these are exactly the kinds of basic affordable foods that people assume will always be cheap and abundant. This is rarely a dramatic empty shelf story. It is a slow squeeze. The cheapest store brands go first. The most popular sizes get inconsistent. The price gap between a sale can and a full-price can grows wider. And you start noticing that the one variety you actually use most often is the one that is suddenly missing. What most people get wrong with beans is buying a single variety and thinking variety doesn't matter. It does. When supply gets tight, one type goes short while another stays available. Building your stock across 3 or 4 different varieties protects you from exactly that scenario. Here's a nutritional angle that most prepper lists miss entirely. Black beans plus canned tomatoes plus canned corn creates a near-complete amino acid profile without any animal protein at all. You are looking at a full balanced meal from 3 cans that together cost under $3 in most markets. And one more thing about canned beans that makes them especially practical for emergency situations: they are already cooked. No soaking. No hours of simmering. No fuel burned. Cold from the can, they are edible. That matters far more than people realize when power is out, stress is high, and time and resources are limited. And remember that drought signal, it is going to come back around when we get to item 5. Because that same pressure is touching more than one category on this list. Item 3. Canned sweet corn. The filler food that fills gaps literally and nutritionally. Right behind beans is canned sweet corn, and this one deserves far more serious attention than it usually gets. The fresh market signal on corn right now is striking. Florida's official freeze damage report documents that sweet corn took some of the most severe losses in the state, with production damage across 45,000 acres estimated at 100%, a complete wipeout, and approximately 83% of the growing season still remaining when those losses were counted. That number is not a typo. 100%. Then FreshPoint's March 20th supply alert confirmed that eastern corn supplies remained extremely short, demand was strong, the market was elevated, yellow corn was gapping, and overall quality was poor. That is the precise setup that pushes shopping behavior toward the canned aisle, because canned sweet corn is one of the most practical substitutes available when fresh corn gets scarce. But here is the thing that people consistently undervalue about corn in a pantry context. It is not just filler. Calories and texture are exactly what you need when you are managing stress and eating repetitive meals. Corn adds sweetness that keeps pantry food from tasting flat. It stretches soups, chili rice dishes, casseroles, and skillet meals. And it is one of the easier vegetables to eat cold straight from the can, with zero preparation required. Black beans, canned corn, a little salt, that is a cold emergency meal that takes 30 seconds to open. For families with children, corn is also one of the most practical stocking choices you can make, because kids will actually eat it. That sounds obvious, but it matters enormously when you're building a stockpile you may genuinely need to live on under stress. Now here's something almost no prepper channel will tell you about canned vegetables and your brain during extended pantry eating. Food texture and color have measurable effects on appetite, satisfaction, and mood. Corn is bright, sweet, and texturally distinct from everything else on this list. That contrast keeps meals from blurring into a single sensory experience, and that matters a great deal more than people expect after 10 days of pantry-only eating. Now let's talk protein. And the news on that front is more complicated than most people realize. Item 4. Canned chicken, freezer-free protein that's about to get more expensive. The protein question in emergency preparedness always comes back to meat, and the category that most households default to is chicken. So let's talk about what is actually happening in the chicken supply chain right now, because it is not a vague concern. It is a concrete, documented pressure building from multiple directions. On March 3rd, Texas A&M AgriLife reported that experts expect chicken output to slow and prices to climb, and they were specific about the mechanism. The concern is not only about broiler farms themselves, but about breeder flocks, the flocks that supply fertilized eggs for broiler hatcheries. Losses in breeder flocks ripple through the entire production chain in a way that takes months to recover from, because you cannot simply restock a breeder flock overnight. One expert in that report stated directly that he expected some contraction and that prices typically go higher when contraction happens. At the same time, Reuters reported that bird flu wiped out 7.4 million chickens in Pennsylvania alone in a single month. That is not an old story. That is a current operational reality that is still affecting production numbers. Here is what most people get wrong about fresh chicken as a preparedness strategy. It depends on cold storage, consistent promotions, and a supply chain that runs smoother than people realize. When one of those three things breaks down, fresh chicken is the first category that gets inconsistent. Canned chicken removes that dependency entirely. A can of chicken goes into rice, pasta, soups, wraps, casseroles, and quick emergency meals in minutes. One can, one pot, some noodles, and canned broth. That is 4 servings of hot food in under 10 minutes with no refrigeration required. For beginner preppers, this is the fastest way to stop building a pantry that is all carbohydrates and no lasting protein. If this list is changing the way you think about your pantry, hit subscribe. We cover food supply pricing and availability signals every single week, and there is a lot more changing in the coming months. Item 5. Canned salmon, the nutrition policy that's getting expensive fast. If canned chicken is the workhorse protein on this list, canned salmon is the nutrition insurance policy. And the reason it belongs here right now is specific. The salmon market is entering 2026 with a tightness that most shoppers haven't registered yet. At the Global Seafood Market Conference held in Florida, a panel of industry experts stated that overall global farm salmon supplies are expected to remain essentially flat in 2026, while demand continues to grow. The consensus view from that panel was that prices could rise somewhere between 16% and 18% this year alone. One panelist said the U.S. spot market could start getting what they described as a little crazy by the middle of the year. Then look at the early wild catch signals. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game's 2026 forecast reports the Copper River wild Chinook run at just 33,000 fish, and total Copper River sockeye is forecast at 1.455 million fish, 11% below the recent 10-year average. Copper River is not every can of salmon on an American grocery shelf, but it is a real and early signal from one of the most important wild salmon systems in the country, and it is telling you that the wild side of the category is not entering this year with a cushion. Here is what most people miss about canned salmon. One can delivers protein, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, vitamin B12, and calcium, all in a single unit that sits on your shelf for 2 to 5 years. That is a nutritional profile that almost nothing else on this list can match. At around $3 to $4 per can in current markets, a single can provides approximately 35 to 40 grams of protein. That math changes quickly when prices move 16 to 18%. In a hard month, canned salmon becomes patties, rice bowls, sandwiches, pasta, or a cold meal eaten directly from the can. It also solves the appetite fatigue problem that develops when a pantry is too monotonous. And speaking of foods that are more nutritionally complete than most people realize, what I'm about to show you at item 8 genuinely surprised me. First though, the item that almost every prepper channel completely skips. Item 6. Canned sardines, the most dismissed can in the aisle and the smartest buy. Sardines. I know. Just hear me out for 60 seconds, because the data here is genuinely hard to argue with. Sardines are the only item on this entire list that wilderness survival instructors, military field nutrition planners, and long-distance endurance athletes all independently recommend as a primary shelf-stable protein. Mainstream prepper content almost universally skips them. Not because the numbers don't support them, they absolutely do, but because of one solvable problem: taste bias. Let's deal with the numbers first. A single 3.75-ounce can of sardines contains approximately 23 grams of protein, around 1,400 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids, approximately 300 milligrams of calcium from the edible bones, and roughly 190 calories. Shelf life sealed: 3 to 5 years. Price per can in most U.S. markets in 2026: somewhere between $1.5 and $2.5, depending on brand and retailer. That makes sardines one of the highest protein per dollar, highest omega-3 per dollar foods available anywhere on a standard American grocery shelf. Not in the canned aisle. Anywhere. Stop for a second. I want you to think about the last time you actually looked at the nutrition label on a can of sardines. Because if you have never picked one up, those numbers are genuinely staggering compared to what that can cost. Now the taste problem. Sardines packed in water are the strongest, most polarizing version. Sardines packed in tomato sauce taste significantly different. The tomato rounds off the fish intensity in a way that is broadly palatable. Sardines in mustard are the most beginner-friendly option. The packaging matters more than the sardine itself. And on crackers with a little hot sauce, you are looking at a 400-calorie emergency meal that requires zero fuel, zero water, and zero preparation time. If you have been skipping sardines because of taste assumptions, you are skipping the best protein per dollar item on this entire list. Buy one variety. Try it before you stock it. Then stock what you'll actually eat. Now let's talk about a gap that almost every pantry list ignores entirely, and it has nothing to do with protein. Item 7. Canned coconut milk, the hidden cooking fat problem nobody talks about. Here is something that very few emergency preparedness discussions ever address. In an extended disruption, you are not just going to run out of food. You are going to run out of cooking fat. And when that happens, it changes every recipe, every calorie calculation, and every meal's ability to actually satisfy. Most people stock calories. Barely anyone stocks fat. And fat is doing 3 critical jobs in your pantry simultaneously. It is making food taste satisfying, it is carrying fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, and K, and it is providing the caloric density that prevents you from feeling hungry again. Canned full-fat coconut milk solves this problem in a way that almost nothing else in the canned aisle can. A standard 13.5-ounce can contains approximately 450 calories and 48 grams of fat. That is the highest caloric density of any item on this list. It also functions simultaneously as a cooking oil substitute, a cream substitute, a soup enricher, and a complete flavor transformer. Here is what most people get wrong. They treat coconut milk as an exotic ingredient for specific recipes. But in a pantry context, 1 can of coconut milk turns plain rice plus canned beans into coconut rice and beans, a genuinely satisfying, flavorful meal that does not taste or feel like survival food. Add a can of chickpeas and some spice, and you have a full curry that keeps people eating without complaint. The global supply story on coconuts has also been less comfortable than it looks. The practical advice is simple. Stock 3 to 4 cans of full-fat coconut milk. Use it as your cooking fat first, your flavor enhancer second, and your calorie booster third. It is one of the most versatile items on this list and one of the most consistently overlooked. Item 8. Canned pumpkin, the vitamin A can that keeps your body running. Here is the number that surprised me when I looked into it. 1 cup of plain canned pumpkin delivers over 200% of the recommended daily intake for vitamin A. Over 200%. From 1 cup of a can that costs under $2. Why does that matter? Because extended pantry eating, even with your protein covered and your calories counted, creates a specific nutritional deficit that most people do not notice until it has been several weeks. Vitamin A is critical for immune function, eye health, skin integrity, and the proper function of your respiratory system. These are not minor benefits. These are the systems that start slipping first when diet quality drops, and they slip quietly, without obvious warning signs. A single 15-ounce can of pure canned pumpkin contains approximately 83 calories, 7 grams of fiber, and about 245% of the recommended daily vitamin A. That is one of the highest nutrition-to-calorie ratios of any canned vegetable available in a U.S. grocery store. Shelf life is typically 2 to 5 years sealed. Price per can is generally well under $2. Now here is the thing that trips people up at the grocery store. There are 2 products that look almost identical on the shelf. Pure canned pumpkin, the single-ingredient product, and pumpkin pie filling. They are completely different. Pumpkin pie filling is heavily sweetened and spiced. Pure pumpkin is just cooked, pureed pumpkin, with no added sugar and no added ingredients. Read the label. Make sure it is 100% pure pumpkin. Here is the pro tip that makes this item genuinely useful even in non-emergency cooking. Canned pumpkin blended into tomato soup or bean chili adds fiber, nutrients, and body without changing the flavor in any noticeable way. Kids won't detect it. Adults won't care. And your immune system will be significantly better supported after 2 weeks of pantry eating because of it. Fat is addressed. Vitamins are addressed. There is still one category that most survival pantries completely ignore, and it is so obvious that people assume it handles itself. Item 9. Canned evaporated milk, the dairy gap most pantries don't know they have. Fresh milk is one of the first products to go unreliable during supply disruptions, and it is one of the most overlooked gaps in emergency preparedness. Not because people don't use dairy, most households use it constantly, but because people assume the dairy case will always be stocked, and they have made no plan for when it isn't. Canned evaporated milk is the answer that most people walk right past. A 12-ounce can of evaporated whole milk contains approximately 25 grams of protein and around 600 milligrams of calcium, roughly the nutritional equivalent of nearly 2 full glasses of fresh milk, concentrated into a shelf-stable can with a 12 to 24-month unopened shelf life. The most common misconception is that powdered milk is the only shelf-stable dairy option. It is not. Evaporated milk is significantly richer than reconstituted powdered milk, far more palatable when consumed directly. It works as a coffee creamer, a baking substitute, a soup enricher, and a base for sauces and puddings. Mix it with canned pumpkin and a pinch of spice and you have a warm, nutrient-dense drink that takes under 2 minutes to prepare. U.S. dairy has also been navigating real cost and trade pressures through this period, which means the assumption that fresh dairy will always be cheap and consistently available. Now I want to challenge you for just a moment. Picture your pantry clearly right now, or go look at it if you can. Do you have any shelf-stable dairy in there at all? Not powdered coffee creamer. Not chocolate powder. Actual canned dairy with real protein and calcium. Most households honestly don't, and it is a gap that costs almost nothing to fix. 2 more to go. And the next item is the one that addresses what happens when you can't cook at all. Item 10. Canned lentil soup and ready-to-eat meals, the zero infrastructure tier. Every item on this list so far has quietly assumed something. That you have heat, that you have water, and that you have the mental bandwidth to cook. This item removes all 3 of those assumptions. Canned ready-to-eat soups, particularly lentil-based options, are the zero infrastructure tier of emergency preparedness. They are designed to be consumed straight from the can, at whatever temperature they are when you open them. No fuel. No pot. No prep time. No water. Open, eat, done. That is a category that plays by completely different rules from everything else on a pantry shelf. A standard canned lentil soup delivers roughly 15 to 20 grams of protein, 30 to 40 grams of complex carbohydrate, and 8 to 12 grams of fiber per can. That is a genuinely complete, nutritionally serious meal with nothing required beyond a can opener. Here is what intermediate preppers get wrong about this category. People who own camp stoves, who know how to cook over a fire, who are confident about their gear, those are exactly the people who dismiss ready-to-eat cans as unnecessary. But camp stoves run out of fuel. Fires require conditions and safety. Clear headspace and cooking ability are the first things to go when genuine stress hits. And in the scenarios where emergency preparedness matters most, the zero prep shelf is the one that actually gets used. The practical move is straightforward. Build a dedicated zero prep shelf. 1 week's worth of canned ready-to-eat meals, lentil soup, canned chili, bean soup, chicken noodles stored separately from your main pantry, clearly labeled. That shelf exists for one purpose. The scenario where everything else is unavailable. And now the last item on this list. This one almost didn't make the cut. But when I dug into the numbers, I realized it might be the single most underrated can on any grocery shelf in America right now. Item 11. Canned peaches and mixed fruit. The morale item that's also a market crisis. The last spot on this list goes to canned fruit, specifically peaches and mixed fruit, and the reason it earns this position is not sentiment. It is a genuine documented supply disruption that is already in motion in the U.S. food processing sector. Del Monte's Modesto Cannery, which was the company's last remaining major processing facility in California, has been shut down after no buyer came forward to acquire the plant. The closure affects approximately 600 permanent workers and an additional 1,200 seasonal workers. More importantly for shoppers, Del Monte had previously contracted approximately 35% of California's cling peach volume. Pacific Coast Producers, which moved to take over key Del Monte canned fruit assets and inventory, has confirmed that it cannot replace Del Monte's full production output. And on March 19, Fresh Del Monte separately announced it completed the acquisition of select Del Monte Foods assets, which confirms the brand is not simply vanishing overnight. But a brand surviving and processing capacity surviving are 2 very different things. The brand can persist while the actual volume of product available shrinks. And once processing capacity weakens, the affordable, dependable end of the canned fruit aisle becomes less predictable than people expect. The latest reporting from California also indicates that growers are already removing or planning to remove significant areas of peach orchards after losing the cannery relationship they depended on for their production. Once orchards are removed, you cannot restore that production capacity for years. Here is the deeper argument for canned fruit in any serious pantry. Morale is a survival factor. This is not a sentimental claim. Extended pantry eating on nothing but protein, starch, and salt creates real appetite fatigue and genuine psychological strain. A pantry that is technically stocked, but sensory monotonous gets harder to live on day after day. Canned fruit solves several practical problems at once. It gives you something ready to eat without cooking. It gives you something with a long shelf life that fresh fruit cannot match. And it gives children, elderly family members, and anyone with reduced appetite under stress something lighter, sweeter, and easier to eat when nothing else sounds appealing. It breaks the cycle. The shelf impact of the Del Monte situation is not likely to be dramatic and sudden. It will be thinner promotions, less depth in the cheap fruit categories, and fewer bargain stacks over time. Which means the window to stock up at current prices and current availability is now before the market fully absorbs what just happened to U.S. canning capacity. Alright, all 11. Let me run through them fast so the full picture is clear. Canned tomatoes, your flavor and meal base. Canned beans, your protein and calorie anchor. Sweet corn, your texture, calorie filler and cold meal option. Canned chicken, your freezer-free ready protein. Canned salmon, your nutritional insurance policy. Sardines, your highest value protein buy per dollar. Coconut milk, your cooking fat and calorie density solution. Canned pumpkin, your immune system and vitamin insurance. Evaporated milk, your shelf-stable dairy. Ready-to-eat lentil soup, your zero infrastructure emergency tier. And canned peaches and mixed fruit, your morale anchor and the item with the most live supply pressure behind it right now. 11 cans. But here is the framework that makes them work as a system rather than just a pile. Think of your pantry in 4 tiers. The zero prep shelf, your ready-to-eat cans that need nothing to use. The protein tier, chicken, salmon, sardines, beans. The flavor and nutrition tier, tomatoes, corn, pumpkin, coconut milk, evaporated milk. And the morale tier, canned fruit. When you shop with those 4 tiers in mind, you are not just filling shelves. You are building infrastructure. One more thing worth saying. The practical rule of pantry building is buy what you eat and eat what you store. Rotation prevents waste. If you stock items you never use in normal life, they sit until they expire and you lose both the food and the money. Every item on this list is something you can integrate into regular meals starting this week. That is how a real pantry stays functional. It is not separate from your life, it is part of it. A quick note for anyone planning to rely heavily on canned goods for extended periods. Most canned foods are high in sodium. Rinsing beans, corn, and vegetables before use removes 20 to 40% of the sodium content. That is not a reason to avoid canned food. It is just a reason to keep it in mind and stay hydrated. Now the comment I want to see. Drop an 11 in the comments below if you already have more than half of these items in your pantry. And if you're starting from scratch, drop a 0. I read these and it helps me understand where people actually are with their prep. And before you go, next week I am covering something that might be uncomfortable to hear. The 5 things people buy thinking they are preparing for hard times that actually create more problems than they solve when things go wrong. You might be surprised by what is on that list. It includes at least one item that almost every beginner prepper buys first. Stay subscribed so you don't miss it. Take care of your household. Stack smart. And we will see you next week.